Hi, everybody. I'm Pat Ogden, founder of Sensorimotor Psychotherapy Institute. And as we come to the end of March, which celebrates women, I wanted to talk a little bit about how, as women, we are socialized. Um, we learn from a very early age that society expects certain attitudes, skills, standards, and behaviors according to our gender. And this implicit learning influences us to know will be less acceptable and less worthy in society if we deviate from these expectations. So we're typically socialized into seeing gender as masculine, feminine, although thankfully this is being challenged. And some of the socialization can be positive and serve leadership, as Ali Joel, one of our office staff at Sensorimotor Psychotherapy Institute, pointed out in one of her graduate papers. She talked about how her ability to empathize, be humble, to question herself, to be highly emotional, intelligent, are all characteristics of that she developed as she was socialized as a girl and a woman, and that these serve her well in leadership, I think, which is true. But I want to talk a little bit about how the socialization affects us in our bodies. As women, we're all familiar with the objectification of our bodies, right? The stereotypical ideals of the female body. We're supposed to be thin and fit, have little waists, not much body hair, a soft voice, long silky hair, and so forth and so forth. And we're used to being looked at, right, like objects rather than as subjects. And this socialization and conditioning really reflects white supremacy and our patriarchal culture. And it's even worse for women of color. In 1947, Pauline Murray, she coined the term Jane Crow to signal this double impact of gender socialization and racial discrimination on Black women. It has a huge impact. Billie Eilish, in a recent interview, she said, well, if what I wear is comfortable, I'm not a woman. If I shed the layers, I'm a slut, right? So we're very accustomed to the female body being scrutinized and sexualized and objectified. I want to talk a bit about how it affects, how this gender socialization affects the way that we live in our bodies. Sandra Bartke, who was a professor of philosophy and gender studies at the University of Illinois in Chicago, she said women's body language speaks eloquently, though silently, of her subordinate status in the hierarchy of gender. I just love that, that quote from her. We are taught from little on to keep ourselves smaller, to have our legs crossed, to pull ourselves in, to not take up a lot of space, to not man-spread, as we use a current term that's applied to the space that men are encouraged really to take up. We're taught instead to keep our arms close to our bodies, to have less arm movement, and to keep ourselves more slumped rather than upright. There's a lot of research that speaks to this socialization on women. And these, the patriarchal norms are reinforced through these patterns of nonverbal communication. the ways that we inhabit our bodies. So they're used like consciously or unconsciously to maintain social norms and power dynamics between men and women. So common social gestures, the way we move and inhabit our bodies, it perpetuates sexism and the history of domination and subordination that women have suffered for centuries, right? Although it's getting better, as we know. And I think this is even more like important because so much research shows that the impact of nonverbal communication is 4 times stronger than that of verbal language. So why is this important? It's really important for us as women because so much research now shows the impact of body posture on things like negative thoughts, mood recovery, self-esteem, arousal, lowering fear, and so forth. So it really shows that an upright, more expansive posture is going to improve our mood, lead to more esteem, more positive thoughts, more positive emotions. One study even showed that it improves affect and fatigue in people with depressive symptoms. So if we have been socialized as women to live in a pulled in, more maybe collapsed postures that keep ourselves small, and I'm exaggerating here, it can be very subtle as well. It's going to impact how we feel about ourselves and how we, relate in the world. So it's something that we might want to look at as women. I think, though, we want to be aware that changing our posture and our movement, like if we take up more space, if we have more expansive movement, if we really fill up our bodies, right, and allow our arms to swing, allow our posture to be upright, it can contribute to conflict. Uh, these more upright, expansive postures, they're going to support assertion and ambition and leadership and so forth. But it can run the risk of negative feedback in a patriarchal culture, which I think we're all aware of. There's a lot written about this. Assertive women, often called bossy, for example, right? And it can also create an internal conflict because it challenges internalized oppression. It feels normal for us to keep ourselves smaller. This is how we've been socialized. So it can challenge that. But at the same time, I with awareness and mindfulness, we can start to look at how we're living in our own bodies and how the physical habits that we've learned, perhaps of constraint or hunched shoulders, pulling in, or collapsing our posture, how we might have learned that as we were socialized as girls when we were small, and how those become patterns, right? And we can start to explore expanding those habits. And like all movements, when we began to challenge them and execute actions like an upright posture or pushing away to set boundaries that have been kind of conditioned out of us in some way, when we begin to challenge them and live in our bodies differently, it starts to restore this sense of hope and efficacy of an action. So maybe it's something as women we can start to play with, right? What patterns have we embodied through our socialization, and how can we challenge them to really become more of who we are? I think of Simone de Beauvoir, who said, "One is not born, but rather becomes a woman." We become a woman through our socialization, along, of course, with a lot of other influences. So I hope that maybe this sparks your thinking and your curiosity about how you live in your own body. And maybe think about priming your body for new action, like play with a more upright posture, play with taking up more space. Okay, thank you for listening, and stay safe, everybody. Bye.